Do you agree with the dozens of human rights organizations, including Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, that Israel has committed a genocide?
I do. Yes.
Okay.
I said that. I do believe that Israel has a right to exist. I want to.
So we have a very important mayoral race coming up. You're a council person.
Yes.
What made you decide to run for mayor in a system where the mayor is technically weaker than the collection of council members?
Well, the mayor has a lot of power here in Los Angeles. I think it is a weaker mayor system than in a city like New York or in a city like Chicago. But the mayor here does have a lot of power. The biggest power that they have is essentially managing all of the departments. They get to hire and fire department heads. They get to set their priorities. They get to make sure that they're actually doing their jobs. They create the first draft of the city's budget, and then the council takes it on and kind of wrangles with it as well. But the mayor does have a lot of power, and a lot of those powers were given to the mayor during the last charter reform process. And I want to make sure that we're actually using those powers to advance better goals for Los Angeles. And I was looking at this mayoral election and, disappointed by the lack of choices that would have brought us in a better direction, and, decided to throw my hat in the race.
Okay. So you've distanced yourself in the past from Zohran Mamdani. I want to ask you, or at least according to this Forward magazine article, but I don't know if that's still the case. This is what the Forward magazine article said, that, can a democratic socialist who affirmed Israel's right to exist, can she be LA's next mayor? Nithya Raman thinks she can win over city's Jewish voters. Step one, convince them she's not Zohran Mamdani. We can start there, or, I was going to ask you, the Zohran method, what are your top 5 policies?
Yeah.
Why do you think the Forward magazine has this kind of assessment?
I think it's just because I am different from Mamdani. I have been a city politician for the past 5 years, and I have a record that I ran on, that I'm running on right now. I have led in LA the largest expansion of tenant protections in the city in 40 years. I actually led the process through which we lowered allowable rent increases in rent stabilized units here in Los Angeles for the first time in 40 years. Increases went from being, up to 10% to now being capped at 4%. I took away the extra 10% surcharge that landlords could pass on to tenants if they had a second kid. This is how our system was built here in the city of Los Angeles. And I've really worked to try and make it a fairer one for working people, for low-income renters, for people who are really struggling here. And that's been the core of my work at City Hall.
Okay. But let's do the Zohran method. What are your top 5 priorities for Los Angeles, and how would you go about implementing them?
Well, I want to address the cost of housing, and I want to do it in 2 ways. I want to make sure that we're protecting renters better. We have a lot of laws on the books. Our city departments are not oriented around protecting them. I want to create an office of tenant protections in the city, and I want to make sure that everything that the city does when a tenant reaches out is really about making sure that people can stabilize and stay in their homes when they're facing unfair evictions. I also think we need to build a lot more housing here in Los Angeles. I don't know how much you know about the history of LA, the history of housing politics in Los Angeles, but this city has pushed back against the construction of new housing, and in ways that have made it more segregated. Wealthier neighborhoods have pushed back housing a lot, and we have a shortage of something like 500,000 units of housing, especially affordable housing. I believe, housing really should be a right, and people need to be able to afford to live here. The city cannot build the amount of social housing, public housing that we need. And I want to make sure that we are able to generate more units so that the cost of housing actually goes down. So for me, this is really at the core of what I want to do here in LA. I also think we need to address homelessness with services, with shelter, and make it really effective so that people don't lose faith in our system right now. I think a lot of people are looking at our responses to homelessness. This is a city that has taxed itself 3 times in the last few years to pay to address the crisis on our streets with compassion, with care, with shelter, with housing, if we don't make that system work for people, I think people lose faith in government. And I really believe in government, and it has to work. We have to show that this approach of offering shelter, offering services can work to address the crisis on our streets. Otherwise, people will turn away to a much more carceral, much more, enforcement-focused system that I think is really bad for Los Angeles.
Out of the top three candidates, you actually have a lot of experience with homelessness initiatives. You have a lot of hands-on experience. One of the most frustrating things that I saw on that debate stage was when Spencer Pratt was talking to you about how, if you want to fix homelessness, if you think you can like communicate your way out of homeless people being homeless, you should go talk to them. And yet out of that debate stage, you were the only person who has actually had a hands-on approach on this. I wish you would have brought it up in that moment to be like, I actually have.
Well, I tried. I was shut down a lot in that debate.
I actually have, literally communicated with homeless people and have had a very successful initiative in moving them into permanent shelter. As opposed to these like patchwork solutions that are usually offered.
Spencer Pratt wants to respond to our homelessness crisis, I think, in a way that is really grounded in making people feel afraid and in kind of engendering fear of people on the streets. I think we can address this crisis effectively, and we can address it with real policies that work. And that is sheltering people, that is housing people, that is making sure that people have mental health services and substance use services. We have to do that work if we really want to make sure that we're addressing homelessness
effectively. Can you talk
effectively.
directly about like what you have done for people that might not know as far as like your initiatives? Like, because I remember there was a very successful one where you guys went into a lot of the homeless encampments and established a point of contact and a relationship with these people instead of just like engaging in these mass sweeps that are oftentimes very damaging, where there's a lot of destruction of property and the like. It was a much more humane method and it was much more successful. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So across my district, we have actually reduced street homelessness by 54% in just a period of 3 years. And we did that not by pushing people across the sidewalk to another sidewalk or pushing people into another neighborhood, but by going to them encampment by encampment, person by person, offering shelter, offering housing, moving people indoors. And then once people are indoors, then you can clear the sidewalk and, get rid of the trash, and those areas stay clear because people's homelessness has actually been addressed. I think that is the most important aspect of this, is that we have to address homelessness. You can't just push it around from place to place. That doesn't work. It's never been proven to work. This is the only evidence-backed solution. And it is also the only humane solution. And it is what we've done in my district. And it is that system that I want to bring citywide in a much more effective way than we're doing it right now.
Yeah. Housing policy and homelessness are intertwined with one another in a very important way, even though a lot of people like Spencer Pratt and not right now. A lot of people like Spencer Pratt and even others, like even Karen Bass to a certain degree, don't often make that connection. Los Angeles has the fewest homes per adult in the country. 18 to 24-year-olds are the fastest growing demographic in among the homeless. There's been a 64% increase. So you've talked about increasing housing construction, about your propositions are about tripling annual housing construction. There are some critics of this, though, however, obviously. There are some NIMBYs. Some critics of this say that this benefits the developers and it will gentrify communities. How do you ensure that the housing boom still serves working class Americans rather than wealthy investors?
Well, first, I want to make sure that new housing doesn't displace existing residents. That is really important. That's why you need to do protection and production side by side. That's why I've been so focused on making sure renters are protected throughout my work. And I want to make it a core focus of my work if I'm mayor as well. But I also think that you can build new housing in ways that actually benefits communities and doesn't actually accelerate displacement. So you can create plans for cities that ensure that working families are safe by making sure you're planning in ways that creates more density in neighborhoods that are wealthier, that have historically resisted it, while limiting new density, limiting new growth in neighborhoods that are really suffering from gentrification and displacement. And you can embed that into your plans for the city. You can embed kind of protection of working class people right into the plans that you have for where you want to build more housing. And that's exactly what I've pushed for in my time in council successfully, and exactly the vision that I have for building more housing going forward. I also want to be very clear that the market will not provide housing for everybody. Not everyone will be served. There are going to be the lowest income Angelinos, the people who will never be able to afford what the market is providing them. And that is where I think the government needs to step in. We have to build public housing. We have to build social housing. We have to build affordable housing. All of this is part of my vision for how we address our housing crisis, but we have to do all of it if we want to actually get us out of this moment of crisis here in Los Angeles.
So you mentioned public housing. Are you in favor of socialized housing then? You're in favor of public housing?
I love public housing. I phone banged for HHH, which was actually an expansion of supportive housing, which is I think of as public housing. I campaigned for Measure ULA, the mansion tax, which is giving the city a source of funds for building new housing for the first time. And we're building affordable housing. We're building social housing. We're building exactly the kind of housing that is free of market constraints, that can serve the needs of those people who aren't being served by the market.
Okay. You've blasted Karen Bass's Inside Safe program that's designed to reduce homelessness. Can you explain a bit about the program and why it's had its problems, like the $85,000 per year price tag for a simple motel room? There's some other stats we can get into as well. 40% return to the street.
Yeah.
$225 a night in motels. Only 1,243 of the 5,800 participants served moved into permanent housing, and it's $110 a day for food, but people were served instant noodles.
Yeah, it is. I think the program at its core is something that I think is important for LA. Like, let me just be very clear. I support efforts to shelter people in housing that is dignified. And the motel program is one pathway to doing that. But the way that the program has been designed and the way that it has persisted in its design for many years is that it is too expensive to address the scale of the crisis. And we are leaving people on the streets because we're not doing the work to actually generate the kind of shelter that we need. We cannot do that. We cannot allow people to suffer on the streets of Los Angeles. This is the moral crisis of our time. And we absolutely cannot waste money on too expensive solutions that don't bring as many people indoors as possible. I want to do the work to actually build a system that's effective at sheltering people, that brings people indoors into options that are more cost effective and that are actually better at keeping people housed.
This seems to be a consistent problem with a lot of California projects statewide, and certainly is an issue in Los Angeles as well. How do you address corruption that takes place in certain programs such as this one, where clearly there are, in certain instances at least, friendly NGOs and even friendly for-profit institutions that take on government contracts.
Yeah.
And instead of trying to create the most efficient system possible, it simply serves to pay the people that are friendly with the government, or at least are lobbying the government. Is there a way to address this corruption inside of Los Angeles?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why I've been really focused on oversight. I think oversight is really important. And it's not because I think government is corrupt all the time. Like, I really believe in government. I'm in this job because I want this city to work for the people of LA. And programs that are too expensive like this, instances of corruption that show up, every time that happens, residents lose trust in their city government. And that's bad for Los Angeles. That's bad for this city. And I've really pushed on the issue of homelessness to make sure that we are creating a system of oversight that really works, that we know where every dollar is going, that we know how the money is being spent, how many people are being brought indoors, what kind of services they're getting. And if we don't do the work to build that system, people will lose faith in government. And I worry about that. I don't know about you. I mean, you've lived here for over a decade now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how you feel about the city and the city government, but I feel like people have a sense of alienation from their city government right now. People have a loss of faith. And I don't know whether you're seeing that reflected in your experiences with Los Angeles, but
Definitely. I mean, I think there's a lot of issues with Los Angeles city government. Okay, I have a question for you. So we've talked a lot about these initiatives. We talked about corruption, and you talked about a bloated budget in certain instances. You've been critical of Karen Bass and the way that she's used the existing city budget in the past. One of the questions I obviously have is Kenneth May's analysis as well. This was a huge problem where it seems that the police budgets have increased over and over again. And part of that was in an effort to justify additional budgets for the police, a police union budget that you've also criticized. Karen Bass actually took away some of the funds from the technicians that were responsible for fixing the fire engines. This led to less fire engines being readily available in the wildfires as well. So there were obviously a lot of criticisms of Karen Bass, some stupid, some silly, and some valid. Do you agree with the assessment that the police budget is ginormous and is eating away at some of these necessary social services, some of the necessary services like even the lights not being turned on at night in many streets of Los Angeles?
Yeah, I mean the size of the police budget is driven. People talk about our annual budget, but it's really the size of the police budget is driven by the contract and the size of the contracts that are signed. And the mayor is the lead in negotiating that contract, and then the council has to approve it. And in 2023, we approved a new contract for LAPD, which I spoke out against, I pushed back against, which gave the PD more money than the city had. And that, along with kind of other knock-on effects, led to a $1 billion budget deficit in the city last year. $1 billion.
Mm-hmm.
We were about to lay off 1,600 workers in response to that budget deficit. We barely avoided those layoffs. And what we did to avoid those layoffs was to cut every single city service down to the bone, every single one. We cut things like pothole repair and graffiti removal and streetlight repair. And now we have 30,000 broken streetlights across the city. And the average repair times for a broken streetlight in Los Angeles, the second largest city in the richest country in the world, are a year on average to fix a broken streetlight here. We didn't pave a single mile of street the first 6 months of this fiscal year because we just didn't have the money. And I think these kinds of issues are hugely problematic for our ability to deliver not just social services, but even just the physical infrastructure and the physical services of the city. And, it is driven by that contract.
Okay.
And so now the city's struggling. We have a really big problem.
So I do have a tough question here for you on the police budget. I'm sure you're ready for it. But around the same time as Black Lives Matter was taking place and the George Floyd protests were happening in 2020, you openly called for defunding the police. You have since then said that you do not want to defund the police, whatever that might mean. Obviously, for many at the time, there were different attitudes. I want to hear what you meant when you said defund the police.
Yeah.
For me, it means taking away some of the expansive police budgets and reappropriating it to social programs, homelessness initiatives, and the like, and also allowing there to be crisis managers that go to specific cases like domestic abuse and instances like that are that don't require immediate armed police response. Your platform called for transforming Los Angeles Police Department into a much smaller specialized force. However, in February 2026, 2 days after the launching of your mayoral campaign, you told NBC LA, we need to maintain the size of our police force. Was it, wokeness rising up everywhere in 2020 that led you to say that? What did you mean by defund the police? And why has your assessment changed since then?
After being in government for the last 5 years plus, I think it is really important to make sure that we are able to respond to calls for help from the public. if we don't answer 911 calls quickly, and with the right people showing up when you call, I think we lose the faith of Angelenos, and that really concerns me. Right now, I want to have a very honest conversation about how we deliver that. We don't have an alternative crisis response system built out citywide. I've pushed for increases to that.
Mm-hmm.
We have actually increased that. I've done that in partnership with other council members, and I'm really excited about that. But what we need is a citywide unarmed crisis response system that I want to build out as mayor and I want to fund as mayor. But we only have that in patchwork pieces, and we absolutely need to be able to respond to calls for help. And right now, LAPD is our only response system. And I think that we have to be honest with our constituents and with the public, even when, it means maybe saying different things than you said before about how we actually ensure that we're able to respond to calls for help.
Okay.
I think I as mayor, I have a different vision for how we actually build out that unarmed crisis response system, though. Right now, it's a patchwork. It's only in a few neighborhoods. It doesn't integrate with our 911 system effectively. So if you call for a mental health crisis worker, you can be on hold for 50 minutes. And then it takes even more time for somebody to come out. I don't think that's a crisis response system. You have to have it work with 911. And that is the system that I want to build out. And my dream is for a system of public safety in Los Angeles where when you call for help, someone picks up the phone quickly and the right person shows up when you call. It can be an armed officer when you need one, and then it can be that unarmed crisis response person when you need a mental health responder, homelessness response, whatever it may be, that never requires an armed officer, and maybe safer and better if an unarmed person comes up.
So let me just get it out of the way. I'm not a police abolitionist. This is very frustrating for some of my anarchist fans to hear. I believe that, police serve a necessary role. The problem with policing is not the existence of police necessarily. Some unit has to maintain the presence of law and order. However, the problem that I have with Los Angeles Police Department and police departments all around the country is that they don't really do their jobs. They don't do their jobs efficiently, or sometimes they don't do their jobs at all. Or when they're doing their jobs, they do it in a very violent manner. Obviously, the LA Sheriff's Department has a litany of other complications. The question for you is, and this is an obvious problem for Zoran as well, has been plaguing Zoran's mayoral administration. How do you plan to, at times, hold the police accountable, make the police force a more efficient force that actually serves the interests of all Los Angelenos and not just, I don't know whose interest they're serving currently, but serving their own personal interest?
Yeah, I think that's, I would agree with some of the critiques that you have of LAPD, and I think accountability and responsiveness are really important. And I think that starts with leadership. I think it is embodied in who you pick for the police chief. And, I would be appointing a very different kind of chief who understood how important it was for LAPD to be responsive to the needs of immigrants in LA, who understood how important these issues related to accountability and transparency are. I don't think we have that in our current police chief. And that's one way in which I think you change how those exact questions that you asked about are answered in Los Angeles. There's also a police commission in place, and the mayor's appointees actually form that police commission. And I would want to pick individuals there who are driving forward towards those exact goals that you talked about, towards greater accountability, towards greater responsiveness, making sure that the needs of Angelenos are being addressed by our armed police response when needed. And I think that's really what I would be doing. These are the tools that are available to the mayor that we don't have as council members, and that I would want to use for those goals.
So, for the record, in 2025, I've had altercations with Los Angeles Police Department, including them shooting rubber bullets at me when we were at the ICE protest. You voted in favor of a $5 million loan to pay those police officers overtime. What was the decision making there? Is this just the cost of doing business? Is this just politics?
Well,
is this something that you stand by?
Well, when people work overtime, the city has to pay them. They had already worked that overtime. When people work that overtime, they're due their paychecks from the city. And when they don't get paid, they sue the city. And then we end up paying them not just their overtime, but also the cost of the lawsuit. So, I'm not making decisions about overtime. I don't make decisions about deployment. But once that is happening, once people have already worked their jobs, that's part of the contract that all city employees sign with the city, which is that if you are asked to do a job, you get paid for it. And if you don't, you get to sue the city to make sure that you're paid. So that was just a very practical response to the situation. Like I said, the biggest impacts for the LAPD budget, the graphs that Kenneth Mejia Controller Mejia is putting out, have to do with the size of the contracts. And I think, when we talk about how we actually impact these issues, I think thinking about that contract process, thinking about how you actually have a real debate about what you need to maintain the size of the force that we need for Los Angeles versus how much money we actually have to spend on police versus everything else that we need to pay for. That's the conversation. That's a place for that conversation.
Let me ask you straight up. Do you think that it's the head count that is a problem? Because that's what Karen Bass claims. And I think Spencer Pratt claims that as well. And that there needs to be more law enforcement officers that we hire? Or do you think the real problem is that we're not utilizing the existing massive behemoth of a Los Angeles police force that we currently have appropriately to efficiently, engage in response?
I think deployment is a huge issue that we don't have a lot of good answers to. There was a study conducted last year from RAND that the police department actually commissioned that talks about exactly this question and found that many officers who are supposed to be deployed out in the field are actually doing secretarial or administrative work, even within our existing police force. So they talk about the fact that we don't have enough police officers, but they're not deploying all of our police officers in the way that the police chief wants them to be deployed. That's challenging. I think we really do need to think about deployment, how we're sending people out, where we're sending people out to, and how we're ensuring that deployment is generating the greatest safety. Here's the other thing that I really want to underscore. A lot of calls that police officers are answering right now don't need to be responded to with armed officers. And if we don't invest in our alternative response systems, we will never be able to take that call load off of LAPD and actually manage deployment better for where armed officers are actually needed. This is why a citywide unarmed response system is so important. This is why we need to have it not just in a couple of different neighborhoods, but really across the entire city. And this is why it has to be integrated with our 911 response, not a system through which you're waiting an hour plus for someone to come out.
Yeah. I agree with you for sure. So you're saying that you're in favor of maintaining the current head count, but also lifting some of the burden, the workload that cops are currently engaging in an effort to make them a more efficient force that can deal with solving crimes and things like that.
Yeah, you need to be able to investigate. You need to be able to solve crimes. You need to be able to address rings that are doing a lot of the bad things that we're dealing with.
All right. Let's get to ICE a little bit. We got to talk about that. Trump deployed 700 Marines to our city. Federal agents in unmarked vehicles arrested and disappeared over 10,000 Los Angelinos last summer, including U.S. citizens holding people in basement cells in the Royal Federal Building. You called the raids cruel and unconstitutional. As mayor, will you commit to refusing any LAPD cooperation with ICE for any reason and to even prosecuting agents who break state law? And do you believe ICE should be abolished?
I do believe ICE should be abolished. Absolutely. And I would absolutely commit to no cooperation with ICE between LAPD, not just LAPD, any city department, any city database. None of that should happen. Sharing information with federal law enforcement just simply should not happen. Federal immigration enforcement. I'm proud to have been one of the co-authors of the Sanctuary City Ordinance here in the city of Los Angeles because I believe this so strongly. I am an immigrant to America myself. I'm a naturalized citizen. Mm-hmm. And so this issue is really personal to me. It's really personal. It is something that I think strikes at the heart of what this city is. This is a city of immigrants. And we have to be fighting and really demonstrating to our residents that we stand up for them and that LAPD shouldn't even be appearing to cooperate with ICE. I think that, again, it really undermines trust in the city. And I think it's bad for LA if that's the case. We really have to be much more forceful about this.
What are some immediate provisions you have in mind that could potentially address the friction between ICE and local law enforcement, or even create necessary friction? One of the things that I suggested to Jacob Fry was, it's a pie in the sky idea, but the potential ticketing of ICE cars, if necessary, because they do love parking illegally regardless. Is there any such enforcement that you have in mind, like the violation of mask bans, for example?
Yeah, I think making sure that when there are city or state regulations that are trying to protect Angelenos, including the state mask ban, which is right now, by the way, the courts deemed it unconstitutional, and now the state is working on a new one. Our chief of police said that he wouldn't enforce it. I think we have to enforce laws that are in place to protect Angelenos. The state and the city are working towards putting those in place so that we have more of these protections. We absolutely should be enforcing them. That may look different from what, from things that might be dangerous. So, for example, on the mask ban, our city attorney may need to play a more important role, because that kind of violation is a misdemeanor. And the city attorney can actually go out and prosecute people for not following those rules and regulations. We can actually make sure that we're stepping up and prosecuting actively when federal law enforcement is not following local regulations. And I think that's what the city needs to be thinking about much more. But I also want to say that in the response to ICE locally here, community groups often took the lead. And I would really like to see a much more robust organizing backbone from the city and from the mayor's office. Across Los Angeles, we've seen differential impacts of ICE raids, which are still continuing. Lots of activity and money coming into certain places, donations, all of that. And in other places, lots of raids with not a lot of support. I think the mayor's office should act as kind of that backbone for response and make sure that resources are being directed where they're needed, make sure that we're doing active know your rights trainings in multiple languages. This is a city that has an incredible diversity of people. We have to be able to go out there and talk to all of them and make sure that they have the tools they need to stay safe. And that can and should be anchored in a mayor's office that sees this at the core of their function.
All right. We're going to get back to housing. And I have some more questions for you on that front. Voters passed the mansion tax, which you said you were in favor of, to fund affordable housing and tenant defense. In January 2026, you moved to carve out a 15-year exemption for developers. United to House LA called that a boogeyman for tax breaks for developers. Are tenant organizers wrong, or are you giving developers what they want under the YIMBY label?
Well, I actually think that what I was trying to do was measure the mansion tax. I think it's really, really important to have that money in place. Mm-hmm. And the mansion tax is facing some very real threats. There is efforts in Sacramento to put an elimination of the mansion tax, of transfer taxes entirely on the ballot. It's now on the ballot. And we're going to have to spend a lot of money to ensure that that measure doesn't pass. And the biggest driver for that measure being on the ballot was LA's mansion tax and opposition to it. I thought carving out this 15-year exemption for new multifamily housing would actually make it so that the state level initiative wouldn't have gotten on the ballot. It got a lot of funding from people who are frustrated that the city wasn't taking action on these issues. That being said, I also do think that we need to be building a lot more housing. The city and the state and the federal government are funding public housing, social housing, all of affordable housing. We're building to our fullest capacity. And guess what we're building every year here in LA? A few hundred units. That is not enough. We need more housing to make sure that working class people can stay here. We need more housing to make sure that young people can come here and see this as a city of opportunity. We absolutely need more housing. We have to make sure that the market is building what we need, whether it is housing for families, whether it is lower cost housing, not just $5,000 studios. And we can generate planning laws that do that. But I will never back away from the statement that we need more market rate housing as well, because the city simply cannot fund all of the housing that is needed.
All right. You're an urban planner.
Mm-hmm.
We have some big events right around the corner.
Yeah.
Measure HLA, Healthy Streets Los Angeles, was passed in March 2024, but only saw 400 feet of compliant bike lanes built in the year that followed. We've also lost over 260 of our neighbors in traffic crashes since HLA took effect. You authored the Transit Signal Priority Motion. You supported the Mobility Plan 2035, and were one of the only 6 council members to endorse the Healthy Streets Los Angeles initiative measure. As mayor, what happens to LA Dot leadership and the council colleagues who spent a decade slow walking the transit network Los Angelinos have already voted for and also paid for? And this extends to virtually every other ballot initiative and measure, because as we all know, people in Los Angeles and even in the state of California broadly will vote for the most advanced, most progressive ballot measures. And then, unfortunately, city government and state government fucking stops it dead in its tracks for decades until people say, what the fuck happened? How do you fix that?
Yeah, well, I really believe in better transit. I really believe in making sure that people have an alternative to their cars. And by the way, this is a economic justice issue too. We shouldn't have a city where you have to also have a car in order to get around. I think it's totally possible to build out a public transit infrastructure and a walkable, bikeable infrastructure that allows people to have options, that doesn't force people to buy a car in order to just get to their jobs. But we're not doing that right now. And a big reason is because our departments are not delivering on these outcomes for people. I have a pretty clear sense of how we can change that. We need to do better coordination. It isn't just the Department of Transportation that's responsible for delivering these outcomes. It's the Bureau of Street Services. It's the people who build our sidewalks. It's the people who build, who plant our street trees and maintain those. We have to be able to, in order to deliver on the big, ambitious goals of HLA, ensure that all of these departments are working together in a cost-effective way such that we can actually build out the mobility network of our dreams. And I'm pushing for exactly that kind of leadership across these departments and changes in our processes that will ensure that we're building that transit infrastructure. There's also ways that we can invest in transit infrastructure that are not crazily expensive, that won't break the bank, that can actually generate much safer streets. So, for example, in neighborhoods, you can put in very low-cost interventions like bollards and roundabouts within neighborhoods to create a neighborhood network of calm streets, not on your arterials, but inside a neighborhood where the traffic is slower, where it's safer for families to walk, where it's safer for kids to bike. Like, that's the vision that I have for Los Angeles. And we can build that out with relatively low cost interventions. And we should be doing that. I think that's what a lot of families in LA want.
What's your vision for a more robust public transit that's readily available? I know you've talked about buses quite a bit.
Yeah.
Obviously, we have somewhat of a metro system, but it's, the problem with Los Angeles public transportation is that it's unreliable, and you can't have a public transportation system that's unreliable. Buses don't come on time.
Yeah.
And the routes don't go to every different part of the city.
Yeah.
What's your plan to address that? Or is there even a plan to build out a more robust public transit system?
Yeah. So our public transit system is largely controlled by Metro, which is a regional entity.
Mm-hmm.
The mayor has 4 appointees on Metro, the mayor's seat and 3 other people. And I want to use our Metro contingent to push for speedy completion of the projects, the big transit investments that are going to be the most transformative for the city of Los Angeles, to ensure that we have the connectivity and the big investments that can actually transform our capacity to get around LA using transit. So that will include the Sepulveda Transit Corridor, which can help get us off of the 405, which can get us from the valley to the west side in less than 15 minutes. It's absolutely incredible. We have to be pushing for these kinds of big transit investments to be built. That means making sure that we have a plan for investment. That means making sure that we are pushing as a delegation to prioritize these projects and not letting other lower ridership projects take precedence. And I'm really excited about doing that. We have underutilized our role on Metro to get what we need for Los Angeles over the last few years. And I want to change that. I want to be a leader at Metro again, and I want to deliver a system of transit that really works for us in LA. But can I talk about one other thing, which is, I think, bus transit is really important. These big train projects are fun. They are exciting. They're important. But most people who take transit actually take the bus. And I think making sure that buses are more frequent and making that a priority for Metro, fighting for that as a priority for Metro is something that I think is really important for us to be doing. I'm also really proud to say that for the first time, because of something that I led on City Council, the Raise LA program, we're actually building out bus shelters across the city. Have you seen those new kind of pale green bus shelters?
I have not.
Yeah, well, they're all over LA. We're building hundreds of them now, and in the future, we'll be building thousands. And that effort came about because we took the advertising revenue from those bus shelters and put them right back into building more bus shelters. And so now with a steady revenue source, we're actually building out transit infrastructure, including shaded bus shelters that are going to make getting around on transit so much better for people. And I'm really proud of that work.
Okay, hell yeah. Well, this also ties into what I'm about to talk about. One of the things that you would be overseeing as mayor in 2028 would be the Olympics. The man in charge of organizing the event, Casey Wasserman, recently sold off his talent agency due to his connections with Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. He had sent gross, flirty emails to Ghislaine. A few months ago, he was pictured meeting with wanted war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu. You've called for Casey Wasserman's, you called for Casey Wasserman's resignation, but then you proceeded to say you'd work with him every day once the board kept him. How do you envision working with someone every day like Casey Wasserman? And do you view this as capitulation, or is there any other alternative here?
I mean, the reality is that the Olympics are happening and that the LA28 board has the power to pick their leadership. If I were mayor, my goal would be to make sure that the Olympics are being executed in a way that benefits Angelenos and doesn't harm them, and that we have the best possible event that we can have. And I will do whatever it takes to do that. That is what you have to do when you're in leadership. You don't always get to pick your partners. You don't always get to pick who you're working with. You have to do what it takes to deliver for the residents of Los Angeles. That's what I want to do.
Okay. As far as the Olympics taking place, is there an opportunity here to justify additional expenditure on a more robust public transit network, given that traffic density will be completely out of control and it's virtually impossible to pack people into small areas like where events are taking place? The only reason why this kind of problem doesn't exist in even places like New York is because of adequate public transit. Is there an opportunity there to justify additional budgets for Metro and also specifically for bus lanes as well?
Well, that was, I think we can definitely invest in getting around, especially allowing for buses to get around through dedicated bus lanes during the period of the Olympics. And I think there's an opportunity to ensure that the investment that we're doing for the Olympics is actually, if when appropriate, being preserved for the long term. So it's not just an investment that we're but using and then, taking away, that we're actually building permanent infrastructure that can last for the city of Los Angeles afterwards. That would be a very exciting thing to think about as part of our investment process. But, I will say that the reason why we have had money for things like the D-line expansion, why we have some money for things like the Sepulveda Transit Corridor, is because we, as a region, passed Measure M, which was supposed to build a bunch of projects, public transit projects before the Olympics. Not all of them, many of them have not been built, but we've made some progress here. And I think the Olympics as an organizing principle for investments is an exciting one that this region can do better. But yeah, and I want to make sure that we're using every last dollar to result in lasting impacts.
Okay. You voted no on the host city agreement over taxpayer overrun liability, but then in October 2025, you voted 14-0 with the rest of the council to waive planning, zoning, and environmental review for Olympics construction with no binding anti-displacement protections. What are some of the plans that you have to make sure that homeless people are not being swept ahead of the sporting events? Because we know that this is one of the major things that cities end up doing. The beautification initiatives oftentimes is just to move homeless people around, engage in sweeps and things of that nature.
I think that's part of why it's so important to actually build out a real system of homelessness response that's effective. We have to be able to bring more people into shelter and indoors. And I want to compare, the situation that there is in New York City versus here. Here we have a third of the shelter beds that we need for our total homeless population. New York has 100% of the shelter beds that it needs for its homeless population and has very little unsheltered homelessness as a result. Mm-hmm. Here in LA, 2/3 of our homeless population is on the streets. They're experiencing unsheltered homelessness. We have to do better at getting people indoors in advance of these big events, because we will have a situation where I think there could be real risks, and I want to avoid against that by moving towards an effective system of safety and care that brings people into the shelters that they deserve to be in, that they need to be in.
Okay, I'll give you a softball now. Reality star Spencer Pratt is currently polling around 22%, potentially squeezing you out of a runoff.
Yeah,
he's running as a MAGA Republican in a deep blue city. He has talked about how much he likes ICE. He's denied Sandy Hook's existence at some point, I believe. He's praised Alex Jones.
He's appeared on InfoWars multiple times. He also
he's a crystal mommy, which some people are. It is what it is. A lot of those guys have turned into MAGA Republicans for some reason. Aside from lying about where he's been living after his house burned down, we found out, shouts out to TMZ, he was living in, Bel Air Hotel, I believe, even though he claimed he was living in an Airstream. Pratt has been pumping out AI slop ads, despite LA being the global center of creative media work. What's your plan to protect creative jobs when in Hollywood, when rich dickheads like Spencer Pratt are too eager to automate away all their work with AI?
Well, I think we need to be fighting for Hollywood. We've lost tens of thousands of jobs here in LA over the past few years, and we've been very quiet. The city has been very quiet about watching these jobs walk away, and it's been really, really frustrating. We saw a little expansion of the tax credit from the state level. I think the mayor, if I'm mayor, I'll be the loudest advocate for a tax credit that doesn't have a cap, that ensures that we're accommodating things like above the line costs, that is guaranteed years into the future. Netflix built a studio in New Jersey. They should have built it here. And the tax credit can be the thing that really ensures that we can have that investment happening in LA. And LA's leadership, our mayor, needs to be the loudest advocate for that. That's what I want to be doing. And we absolutely have to be fighting for that. I think we can also make it easier to shoot here. We can make it easier to make sure that costs are lower here for people who are working here, take away all of our red tape. But we have to be out there fighting for this industry. And I think it's incredibly, incredibly important. I'm also really worried about the potential for job loss from these mergers. We've seen what's happened across different companies that have merged and the numbers of jobs that have gone away. I'm glad to see that the Attorney General is suing this merger. I'm not sure how successful that will be, but I think that kind of proactive pushback against this kind of corporate consolidation is really important. I have some real concerns about this.
Okay. Now for the elephant in the room, a tough one, but a few weeks ago you posted multiple statements, rightfully acknowledging the Armenian genocide and celebrating the Armenian diaspora in Los Angeles. As you might know, the word genocide was coined by Polish Jewish lawyer Raphael Lemkin in the early 1940s during his studies of the Armenian genocide with the intention of criminalizing it and preventing the ongoing Holocaust from ever happening again. Do you agree with the dozens of human rights organizations, including Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, that Israel has committed a genocide?
I do, yes.
Okay.
I've said that.
In your 2020 DFI-LA questionnaire, you said you don't support boycott, divestments, and sanctions, BDS, and that you support Israel's right to exist. Has your stance changed since then? And do you believe Israel has a right to exist in its current form as an ethno-state that's currently being investigated for genocide at the International Court of Justice?
You know, yes, I do believe that Israel has a right to exist. I want to see countries that are operating without apartheid, with equality in their borders. I come from a country, from India, which is, now, operating through Hindu nationalist principles, and I'm deeply critical of it. And I'm critical of that when it happens everywhere.
Do you believe that Israel is an apartheid state then?
I think that it is. Yeah, I think that they're not treating people fairly. That they're treating people unequally. I do believe that, and I'm critical of that. But yeah.
Okay. In February 2024, the SALA censured you for accepting the endorsement of Democrats for Israel LA, a group that has openly opposed a Gaza ceasefire. Knowing what we know now and seeing the videos of Gaza in ruins, do you disagree with that endorsement? Would you still seek it out at this point? Has your attitude shifted, and if so, why?
Yeah, I wouldn't seek it out now. And I've spoken out against the violence in Gaza. I was the co-author of a ceasefire resolution at City Hall. Never was voted on, but I co-authored it and put it forward. I was actually the first person to talk about the violence against Palestinians in the building. And I remain deeply, deeply concerned about the violence across the entire region. That being said, I do want to acknowledge that being mayor, my role is not one that has foreign policy, power. It's really one that is about Angelenos and making sure that Angelenos are safe here, that we're pushing back against anti-Semitism and Islamophobia, both of which have increased in the wake of what's happening. And I think this is the role of the mayor. Was my role as a council member, and one that I'm very focused on. And I want to make sure every person across Los Angeles feels safe expressing their beliefs, feels safe protesting, and something that I will continue to focus on if I'm mayor.
Yeah. The reason why I'm asking this question is because you're right. There are people who like Israel living in Los Angeles. There are people who don't like Israel living in Los Angeles. The overwhelming majority at this point, I believe, especially in the Democratic Party side, is totally on the side of the Palestinians, as polls show over and over again. But local politicians, yourself included, do have a tremendous amount of power in terms of what kind of activism is allowed on U.S. soil in Los Angeles and what kind of activism is not allowed. The reason why I say this is because, and this is, I'm sure you know, there was the DSA open letter. You co-authored a city resolution that made anti-Palestinian LA United School District resolution a city council priority and was used to shut down the United Teachers Union of Los Angeles's members' historic BDS resolution vote as a result of a smear campaign. What do you have to say about that characterization? Has there been some change in your analysis of the situation? Do you feel like those decisions in the past might have been wrong? What was guiding your framework at the time, and what has changed is what I'm trying to arrive at.
Yeah, I think I have become more aware of these issues over my time on city council. This wasn't where I had organized before. My organizing background was really around housing and homelessness issues. That's how I came to the DSA originally. I liked Bernie Sanders, and they were the only organization locally talking about renters' rights.
Mm-hmm.
And I appreciated that. And that's why I got engaged on this issue. And, you know, I think my work on the city council has changed, especially after we've seen the horrors in Gaza. And, you know, I feel like I know more, although I will confess this is still not, you know, my area of expertise. I'm still really focused on the issues facing Los Angeles, and we'll continue doing that.
Okay. Well, the reason why a lot of people, myself included, see this as a important moral test is for the obvious reasons. Some of the reasons that you also acknowledge, but the other reason is because like it's a pretty reliable litmus test to try to figure out if politicians and people who are, you know, seeking out positions of governance are responsive to the needs of the masses, especially considering that this is, you know, now the Democratic Party's overwhelming majority position, rather than beholden to corporate interests. This is the reason why it's like a very effective litmus test, and that's the reason why I'm asking you about it. And like the you know, honest transformation that may have taken place in your worldview, so it doesn't come across as simply someone like, for example, Scott Wiener, who very actively pushed for a lot of pro-Israel provisions, and then now is trying to claim that he actually recognizes that there is a genocide that has taken place because he has a congressional seat that he's trying to win at a time when, you know, everyone is on board. So if there has been a difference in opinion or a change in your mentality, what has been some of the things that you saw that made you reconsider your previous position?
You know, I spoke out about this issue in the ceasefire resolution and in city council because I saw the violence in Gaza and was moved by it. And I think that a lot of people across the country have had that same evolution. And it is, you know, has been one of the biggest issues animating this country, especially in the last election. And, you know, I think I've moved with the people.
Okay.
And I've learned more. And I'm committed to learning more as well, while also acknowledging again that the mayor's seat is not primarily one that is focused on foreign policy issues. And I think
no, of course not.
It is really a place where people are looking to the mayor's office to ensure that we have a safe city for everyone. And to ensure that their ability to speak out about these issues and to work on and to protest, for example, the rights of protesters are really important. And we have to make sure that LAPD is responding in better ways to these kinds of protests. People have to be able to exercise their First Amendment rights. And I think these are the kinds of things that, these are the kinds of places where I think it's important. And these are places where I have spoken out in the past as well. When there was, you know, I think a lot of violence in UCLA, I called for an investigation into what had LAPD done in that, in response to that protest encampment. And, you know, I think these are places where I have pushed back really on these questions already, and places that I would continue to think about where the city can do better going forward.
Okay. Question about where the city can do better. In June 2024, you co-introduced legislation calling for an immediate and permanent ceasefire and the immediate and unconditional return of all hostages. In the same month, Karen Bass and Joe Biden condemned local protests against stolen Palestinian land sales taking place in the Adas Torah synagogue. How do you view the connection between these two actions, and will you vow to end the illegal sale of stolen West Bank land in Los Angeles? Is a practice that is also taking place in New York as well. It's a big point of place in New York as well. It's a big point of contention. A lot of people, including Zoran, at certain times has fallen short of abiding by what he had previously said he would do. What is your view on this? Like protesting outside of a synagogue is oftentimes the only thing that the media covers, when in fact what's taking place inside of the synagogues, places of houses of worship, not always, of course, but whenever there is a protest, it's usually because of these settler fairs that are taking place, which are illegal. Is there anything that you plan on doing about this at all? Do you have an opinion on these land sales that are taking place? Settler fairs that are taking place inside of synagogues?
I mean, look, the what is happening in the West Bank and what's happening with illegal settlements there is deeply troubling. I will confess that I don't know that much about this particular issue, so I don't want to make a commitment to something that I'll do as mayor that I don't know that much about. That being said, and as I said in that article, I really value the ability of people to exercise their First Amendment rights here in the city of Los Angeles. And I want to make sure that religious institutions and people in them feel safe while also honoring our First Amendment right to protest. That's going to be a difficult thing to balance in a very, very troubled time here in Los Angeles. What I make a commitment to doing for everyone in the city is to ensuring that I'm willing to engage with all of our partners, to ensure that we are moving forward while guaranteeing both of these things. And I think it's possible to do that, but it requires deep engagement. It requires work. I've always been willing to do the work, and I'm committed to doing that going forward as well.
Okay. All right, sure. Let's. I'll just move on from that then. There's a lot of, like, Israel is a foreign country. However, there are a lot of connections with local governance, a lot more than many Americans are comfortable with, a lot more than many Americans are aware of. One example is that the Los Angeles Police Department does train with Israeli counterterrorism experts. This is a practice that was a post 9/11 practice that has played a major role in some of the practices that LAPD, alongside numerous other local law enforcement organizations, utilize, like the kettling and corralling practice that many protesters have often criticized. While some of the cost of this counterterrorism expertise is covered by outside orgs, do you believe that our police force should be using our taxpayer dollars to go train in a country that's actively committing an internationally recognized genocide by the very same forces that are committing said genocide?
I would say here that I don't think LAPD should be training in ways that are like those of on a war
Occupying forces.
in military
Yeah.
terms. That troubles me, and I think we shouldn't be treating this city as if it's our enemy. That's not what LAPD needs to be doing. And so the commitment that I make today and always is really to ensure that LAPD is receiving training to be able to keep people safe, and making sure that we're not militarizing our police force, I think, is really important. We are not at a war with our people. We are here to keep the residents of Los Angeles safe, and I want to make sure that we're training people accordingly.
So, do you oppose that private grants and donations would still send police to train in Israel? Or is that something that is outside of your purview as mayor?
It is a little bit outside of my purview as mayor, but again, I would be pushing for better responses here that ensure that LAPD's training is appropriate for what their job is here in LA, which is the safety of Angelenos, guaranteeing the safety of Angelenos, responding to people who are dealing with situations. That's the kind of training that they need.
Okay. Last but not least, you jumped in this race at the very last second. right before the registration deadline. I believe it was a week after I had done something with Ray Huang as well, who's another DSA member who's running for mayor as well. She's polling at 3% or 4%. But you've previously endorsed Karen Bass, who's someone who's referred to you as an ally. What are the decisions that led you to run for mayor as opposed to retaining your seat or fighting for it?
Yeah, I'm upset right now with the state of Los Angeles, and I feel like our mayor has made decisions that have betrayed working class Angelenos over and over again, in return for political donations that are now funding her campaign, whether it's on the bloated police contract, which now the police union is funding millions of dollars, over $1 million against me in this race to make sure I don't make it into the runoff, whether it is expanding our kind of use of Airbnb here, taking away from our housing stock, which is also now donating to her campaign, or whether it's investing in things like our, $3 billion convention center expansion, in return for support from downtown business interests who are now funding her campaign. All of these have taken away from our capacity to be able to provide basic services here in Los Angeles for working people here in the city. And as someone who is a representative of LA, who is here because I want to fight for people in Los Angeles, watching that happen has been really, really frustrating. And the only credible opposition that she had in this mayoral race was Spencer Pratt, a MAGA Republican who, believes 9/11 is an inside job. And what is scary about this individual is that, I think that at a time when people have lost trust and faith in local city government, that kind of energy, that kind of negativity, that kind of, rhetoric can have real purchase here in LA. I think that's bad for LA. I think we deserve a better option. Let's have a real conversation about how Los Angeles can get better. And I want to be a mayor that builds a better city. I know, look, I am not here in this seat running for mayor who is going to have 100% agreement from every kind of uber left person here in the city of Los Angeles. I know that I've been criticized plenty, but I've also brought about, through the work that I've done on the Housing and Homelessness Committee, some of the biggest material improvements for people who live in the city, who are being priced out of the city, who can't afford to live in the city. And I've been laser focused on making those improvements time and time again. That's the pitch that I'm making to the city as I'm campaigning for mayor is, can we build a city that works better for the people? Can we build a city that's not focused on political gain? It's actually focused on material gains for working people here in Los Angeles. Can we make our city machinery work for the people of the city? I think we can. And I have the experience and the know-how and frankly, the work ethic to get it done. You don't have to agree with me on every single thing that I've done on city council or every single position I've taken. You don't have to agree with me that I'm in the exact right position for all of your issues. But I do think that the vision of Los Angeles that I have, which is more hopeful, more just, more fair, that is a vision that I think a lot of people can get behind and should get behind. Otherwise, we have a very bleak future ahead.
Do you think that's why in October 2022, Nuri Martinez, Kevin De Leon, Ron Herrera, and Gil Cedillo were caught on tape plotting to gerrymander you out of office because you had organized renters and homeless people? You demanded resignations. What in your platform breaks it and brings about transformational change for the city's politics as opposed to everyone else?
What? Sorry, I didn't.
I said, what in your platform actually breaks and brings from the norms?
Yeah,
and brings about transformational change?
Here's the thing: that process, that conversation that they had behind closed doors, was about redrawing the lines to benefit themselves. It was about personal political gain. And I put independent redistricting on the ballot in Angelenos passed it and stood up against corruption as a whole. And now the city is better off for it. And my platform is full of exactly these kinds of changes, ways in which we can reorient the city away from the police union lobby, the landlord lobby, the Airbnb lobby, and really make it a place that's working for people. And I think that that is the goal of this work. That is what I want to be doing.
Okay. Rapid fire. Last question I have for you. Rapid fire round is: do you support Medicare for all?
Yes.
Universal child care?
Yes.
Abolishing ICE?
Yes.
Raise taxes on billionaires?
Yes.
Ending can't miss sweeps in LA?
Well, I think depends on your definition of sweeps.
Okay.
Yeah. I think we'd have to be able to do cleanups. We do them humanely. We do it with outreach workers. It's very similar to what Mamdani had touted in his change. I don't think we should be violent. I don't think we should be arresting people, but cleaning up and making sure that we offer hygiene is really important.
Okay.
And I'll stand by that.
$30 citywide minimum wage?
Oh, interesting. I supported the tourism worker wage. Yeah.
Okay. And LAPD's pay trips to Israel?
If not on our dime.
Okay. A free Palestine?
Free Palestine, yes.
Okay. If you like what people heard about you today, how can people get involved with the campaign? What can they do? What are some areas of needs for you right now?
Well, get out and vote. People need to vote. The election is happening on June 2nd. And I think there is only one way in which we keep Spencer Pratt out of the runoff. And that is by voting for me. I am the most viable candidate here, an alternative to our broken status quo or a MAGA Republican. And